Well, guys, we made it through the first 2 weeks, and we are now ready to actually take our first e-learning assessment. And your job this week is to work through the study guide, to work on the assessment. You can kind of do both together. This is a very different type of environment for taking a quiz or eventually a test. It's open note, it's open resource, it's open study guide. Hopefully, please go back and read the do's and don'ts in terms of what is and what is not cheating in an e-learning assessment. I gave you that doc in the e-learning folder in Schoology, so give that a read. But you have a lot more options, a lot more opportunities to be successful on this quiz coming up. But one thing I wanted to do on top of giving you the filled in answer key here with the study guide is just walk through a few problems, because sometimes seeing somebody do the work is easier than just looking at the work already all the way completed. So we're not going to do a whole ton of problems here, just a few of them to kind of give you the idea. So we're probably going to do one, probably look at four, at number 8, and then we'll maybe do a couple of these problems in number 8. Oh, there's 2 number 8s. Well, I just realized that. But you know what? 8's a good number, so we'll go with that. So let's start with number 1 here. So what you need to do in number 1 is we've given you the function as an equation. You need to fill in the table. Notice we've already given you the domain values here. You already have the x coordinates. You just have to figure out what the y coordinates are. All right. Then you have to create the graph and name the characteristics. So one thing that I would recommend doing is put that equation in your graph and then use your table function here to go ahead and be able to find that. So the y coordinates were, let me go back here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, okay. So now this is, learning by example here. So if you notice, guys, that's not the right equation. And the numbers I'm getting are way off and they looked wrong. So that's why I realized this. This should be minus 12. So guys, that's the hazard of doing math and technology, is making sure your technology can only do the problems right if you put the correct information into the calculator. So be careful there. Let's now go back to the table. Now that looks a little bit better. All right. So now we're looking at the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can see that we have 3, -8 right in the middle there, because we see the symmetrical pattern either side, meaning that's the vertex there. So -8, -6, 0. So I'm going to come back over here now and let's fill this in. -8, -6, 0 going to the left, and -6, 0 going to the right there. All right, so now we need to come and graph this here. Now, guys, one thing I noticed as I was just looking at some people's work is that we would do the table, but not really take the time to graph it. And taking the time to graph is important for several reasons. One, we're telling you to do it. That's gonna be part of the grade for this points for this problem. But two, it gives you a very different, oh, that's really bad. It gives you a very different visual understanding of the function, which can make the characteristics over here a lot easier to work with. All right, so we got that there. Now, as we start working our way through these characteristics here, domain, that one's pretty easy. Hopefully you've noticed by now that no matter what we do with domain, it's going to be negative infinity to positive infinity. Let's talk about the range. Talk about our y coordinates. Well, we can see we have a minimum here. This is the lowest point at -8, and it goes up forever. So we are going to start at -8. We're going to go up to infinity, include everything in between. Now, -8 is included because it's actually part of a point, and infinity is not. Right, so if you need to refresher on domain and range, go back to the very first video in the Target 1A-B notes, the very first e-learning video where we talked about domain and range. Actually, it was the first and the second video. Sorry, the first 2 videos would hit this concept. Now, the y-intercept's a little tough because, I mean, drawing this graph, I don't really know where the y-intercept is. But if you remember our trick in general form, which remember this is ax squared plus bx plus c, the c value would automatically give us our y-intercept. So since the c value is 10, what I actually know I should have in my graph is, whoa, that was crazy. Let's get rid of that. Sorry, guys, hit the wrong button there. So we're just going to Ignore those. I don't know what that is, but we'll be fine there. It should actually cross the y-axis there. So my y-intercept is 0, 10. X-intercept's pretty obvious on the graph, 1, 0, and 5, 0. The zeros are just the x-coordinates of the x-intercepts. Guys, that relationship should always be in place. Even if you get the x-intercepts wrong, I can still give you credit for the zeros if you show me you understand this relationship. We already recognized that the vertex was 3, -8. Now remember, the axis of symmetry, the equation, it's a vertical line, so it's always x equals, and it's the x-coordinate there. We already said that this was a minimum, and there we go. All right, so we took our equation in general form. Given the domain, we found the range using the calculator. Oh, if you don't, guys, if you don't know how to use the calculator or you don't have a calculator, remember, we can always just take these x-coordinates, plug them in to get the y-coordinates. Just to show you this, if I plug 3 into this equation here, 2 times 3 squared minus 12, nope, not x. I want to replace it with 3. 3 plus 10, and we do the math here and simplify everything, we're going to get f of 3 equals -8. So either do it with your calculator I did, or you, for each x-coordinate, you can plug it in and find the y-coordinate. All right, so that's doing a problem like this in general form. But what happens, let's go down to number 8 here, just while we're on a roll here. What happens, guys, in number 8, when it's not in general form? Notice this is vertex form. And one of the reasons I picked this is because we should recognize that it seems like we're missing something when we compare this equation to vertex form here. All right, just a quick refresher up here, vertex form. One thing I said in the notes that's good to do is always kind of write it out here. We're missing a k value. Well, we're not missing k. K is actually 0, right? So a couple differences here. First difference, there's no x-coordinates. So we need to figure these out ourselves. And the key, if you notice in the first problem what it did up here, remember, the key was that we had the vertex in the middle. So that's what we need to do to fill in a table where we don't have any numbers to start with is what's the vertex? Well, the good news, guys, is that by finding A, H, and K here, A is -2, H is +3, and K is 0, right? We know the vertex. The vertex is H and K. So the vertex of this function is going to be 3, 0. So then I pick 2 x-coordinates to the left, 2 getting smaller, 2 and 1, 2 to the right. Right now, again, I can either take 1, 2, and 4 and 5 and plug them in and simplify, or we can go to our equation here. Let me turn off that one and turn on this one. And let me go to my table. And now that I know what number I'm looking for 3. You can see right here, 0, -2, -8, 0, -2, -8. So we can very quickly and easily fill in these here. So -2, -8, -2, -8. So we come here and I graph my vertex, 2, -2, 4, -2, what did we say here? 1, -8, and 2, -8. All right, so when I graph my parabola here, going to have a curve that does something like this, and I get a graph like that. One important thing to notice here, guys, is that the vertex is also on the x-axis, making it a vertex and an x-intercept. And that does have an impact on the zeros, which we'll talk about in a second. So now we come here, we go to domain, -infinity to +infinity. Range, this time instead of opening up and having a minimum, we have a maximum and the parabola opens down. So this range actually starts all the way at -infinity and hits a ceiling, a mountaintop at, at 0 here. Now the y-intercept again is off the charts, but this is not general form, guys. Don't take the k value and just make it 0, k. That's not the case. Here we have to do this the hard way. When we're talking about the y-intercept, guys, one thing we always know with the y-intercept is we know that x equals 0. The question is, what does y equal? Well, just like every other value on the table, if I plug in the x value, I can find the y value that goes with this. So let me plug in 0 for x there. So instead of -2 times x minus 3, I have -2 times 0 minus 3 squared. And when we put that in our calculator, we will get negative 18. So even though it's off the coordinate plane, I can still find the y-intercept by using what I know about every y-intercept and substituting and simplifying there. X-intercepts. Now, because the vertex is also an x-intercept, I'll kill two birds with one stone here. We know that there's only going to be one x-intercept, which means we're only going to have 1, 0. The axis of symmetry, again, always x equals 3, and in this case, it's a maximum. So that's what we got there. You will definitely be asked, guys, to kind of work through this type of problem where we give you the function as an equation, ask you to fill in a table, ask you to create a graph, and then ask you to name the characteristics both in vertex form like we have here in the first number 8, and in general form like we have here in number 1. All right, how would you find the vertex, though, in general form if we didn't give you the numbers to start with? Like down here, it's easy because it's vertex form. Well, what about here? Well, we learned a formula that would allow us to do this based on the values for A, B, well, really A and B, but, we'll say A, B, and C because it's there too. This formula, if you remember, the x-coordinate of our vertex was the opposite of B over 2A. Well, A is 5 and B is negative 20. So the opposite of negative 20 is positive 20. And 2 times 5 is 10. 20 divided by 10, x equals 2. Right now that I know the x-coordinate, we can plug in x and simplify to find y. So substituting 2 for x, so f of 2 gives me 5 times 2 squared minus 20 times 2 plus 11. And if we do the math, what that will give me is negative 9. All right, you don't need to see me work through all the order of operations because honestly, you should probably just plug that in your calculator and get negative 9, but also always double check and make sure it makes sense. So what that gives me for my vertex, guys, is that gives me a vertex of 2, negative 9. But notice the question doesn't just say find the vertex, it also is asking whether it is a maximum or a minimum. All right, we got to make sure we know that. Now, how do we know that? Well, it's really easy. You don't have to graph anything. You just have to look at the A value, right? The A value is going to be our key to knowing whether this is a max or a min. Take a look back at the graphs we already looked at. When our graph is a minimum, when our vertex is a minimum, look what's happening to the graph. The graph is opening up. That makes sense. A minimum is a valley. To have a valley with your graph, it has to open up. All right. Notice here, we have a maximum and our graph, our parabola opens down. It's a mountaintop. Well, look at the A values. When it opens down, right, and we have a maximum, A is negative 2. When it opens up and a vertex is a minimum, A was positive 2. So what we talked about in the notes, and we should remember here, is that the sign of the A value tells you which direction the parabola is going to open, and that is also telling you whether the vertex is a max or a min. So since A equals a positive number, we know the parabola opens up, right? It looks like this, meaning that vertex is a minimum. All right. So finding the vertex using the formula and then determining whether it's a min or a max without even looking at the graph is all based on the A value there. All right, we got one more type of problem to look at here before we'll call it a day, and that is identifying the vertex. Now, we kind of already did this, but we just want to double check and isolate this skill here. And it's always good to, think about what are your A, H, and K values. Well, this is A, this is H, and this is K. And we've got to remember that one way to think about this is that H and K are H is going to be the opposite of what it looks like, and K will be exactly what it looks like in the equation. So A is clearly 3. Now, H looks like negative 4, but that should tell me H is positive 4. K looks like negative 5, so K is indeed negative 5. So we've identified A, H, and K, and now we need to do the vertex. Well, the vertex is really easy, guys. It's just the H value and the K value as an ordered pair. Let's take a look really quickly at a problem like D. All right, now D looks kind of funny here because we don't see any parentheses. Well, that's because the H value is a ninja, right? It's a ninja term. So 1/2, the catch is, guys, that this x squared is really x minus 0 squared. 0 is the ninja term, right? If I add or subtract 0, nothing changes. So we can simplify that and we don't see it. but we've got to remember it's there. So when we look at A, H, and K here, right, we can't forget that H is indeed 0. It's very easy to get confused in a problem like this and think that H is the 6, or H is the -1/2, and K is 6. Oops, sorry, not 0, but 6. So we can see the vertex there is 0, 6. All right. We've just got to be aware of that. Also, always pay attention to the ninja coefficients, right? That's actually 1 times 2x squared, and guys, this is actually -1 times x plus 4 squared. Sorry, I said it's 1 times x plus 2 squared. All right, well, that kind of walks you through everything, at least one example in the study guide. I hope this was helpful. Look at the answer key to see all the other problems. And as always, please, please, please reach out through ClassKick. Shoot me an email. I want to help. I'm here. I got, nothing else to do, just sitting at home like we all are. So please, 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 guys, reach out. I want to see everyone do awesome on this quiz and have a really positive experience in e-learning. All right, I'm looking forward to grading them. We'll talk to you later.